Hello and welcome to the next session, which is Studios Uncovered. In this session, we will try and put the spotlight on different studio models of production and debate the pros and cons of each, including UK versus US approaches, acquiring versus growing organically, the right size to be effective creatively, the importance of drama, and the future of factual. Before we start, I want to make a brief declaration of interests. Some of you may know I used to run BBC in-house production. Some of you may know that I'm also on record as supporting the concept of BBC Studios. My wife is on the board of All 3 Media, and my startup has approached all of these companies for money in the last 6 months. So those are the expressions of interest. Now, to join this, I'm joined from my right, Jane Turton from All 3 Media. Jane joined All 3 in 2008. And was promoted to CEO at the beginning of the year. She's played a vital role in building the All 3 business, both in the US, UK, and internationally through acquisition, startups, and setting strategy. All 3 was acquired by the whirlwind David Zaslav and Liberty Global in 2014. On my immediate right, Peter Salmon, Director of BBC Studios, the BBC's new production division. Peter has been a senior creative leader at the BBC, Channel 4 and Granada, and was the founding director of BBC North in Salford, where he ran the largest production centre outside of London. On my left, Kevin LYGO joined ITV in August 2010 as managing director of ITV Studios. It's the largest production company in the UK, and ITV Studios US Group is the largest non-scripted company in America. Kevin also leads the rest of the international division in Australia, Germany, France, and the Nordics. Previously Director of Television and Content at Channel 4, including responsibility for their portfolio of channels. And finally, on my left, Michael Edelstein, the Executive Producer of the global hit Desperate Housewives, and in 2010 became President of NBCUniversal International Studios, where he oversees scripted and non-scripted programming companies across all genres. Their production companies include Monkey Kingdom, producers of Made in Chelsea, and Carnival Films, creators of the award-winning drama Downton Abbey. In 2011, NBCUniversal and its international studios were acquired by the US cable giant Comcast. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the panel. So the way in which we're going to do this, each of them is going to speak for about 2 minutes, telling us about their company, how they do what they do. I will ask them a couple of questions, we'll go around the panel, we will have a little bit of discussion, and I promise you at least 15 minutes for questions from the floor. So please get your questions ready, and with that, we start with Jane.
Hi. All 3 Media, very quickly. So 20 companies. We see ourselves as an independent, which I know becomes a sort of controversial word these days, but properly independent. Federal, highly federal model. The description, I think it was Tim actually this morning, you know, the whole creative autonomy piece is critically important to us. I'd love to pretend I had something to do with the development of Gogglebox. I don't, but Stephen Lambert and his business do. So I think I guess the one most clearly defining characteristic of All 3, the thing we're proudest of, is this federal autonomy, this federal model. We employ people who tend to be entrepreneurial. Again, we make no apology for the fact that we're running a business. You know, at the end of the day, we don't slavishly follow profit, far from it, but profit is an important part of our world because I think through making profit, we invest more. It's very simple. So we are commercial, we're entrepreneurial, we operate in 3 markets. We're not hugely diverse geographically yet. Big in Britain, big in America, growing bigger, and big in Germany. We have albeit we have a federal model, we have a central distribution business. And that central distribution and exploitation is, again, an important part of our particular model. And we have a very big and balanced portfolio of programs. And again, it was something Tim picked up on this morning. We have lots and lots of shows, hopefully all becoming bigger. His merchant banker friends would be reassured to hear. But you know, we have programs that are old, young, drama, non-drama. Our balance tends to be really good between scripted and non-scripted, but we have a big portfolio of different types of shows. That's us.
So Jane, I mean, you stress this notion of federality or the federal structure. What is the creative benefit of the federal structure in your eyes?
They're left to get on with their jobs. I mean, that's what they want to do. You know, there's absolutely no point someone in the centre second-guessing the creative development production process to our mind at all. They're brilliantly good at doing it, and that's what they are allowed to do. And I think our job is to try to support, you know, without sounding too much like a sort of mother hen. This is a business, as I said. Nonetheless, it is about giving people support and the room to innovate, to fail sometimes, to succeed, whatever it may be.
Okay, so the centre, in some people's eyes, would be just overhead.
No, the centre invests, the centre sets strategy. I hope the centre is seen as a support. We do some unexciting things that someone needs to do, like IT and HR, but we do far more than that. I mean, you know, we undersell the value of the centre probably. I hope we are there to be genuinely supportive. We are the people as well who are helping to acquire and start up the new entities that we bring into the group. A lot of what we do is that sort of strategic stuff.
Now, you've had a change of ownership from a VC investor to Discovery and Liberty. What are those two different cultures like? What was it like having a VC investing partner and now under this?
It's very different. I mean, it was very short term. It was all about this year's EBITDA. We were selling off. We talked about multiple arbitrage endlessly. It was very econometrically focused. It was all about the numbers. It's still, you know, at the end of the day, it is still run as a business, but I think the time horizon is completely different. We look at 5 years now. We used to look at 12 months. I mean, that makes a radical difference to the way you plan your business.
Okay. Peter?
Yeah, I'll probably never talk about multiple arbitrage.
Well, you don't know.
I don't even know. I'm going to ask Jane what it is, by the way. Listen, my new job, just tell you a little bit about my new job. My new job looks backwards and forwards, ultimately towards creating BBC Studios. Years ago, a brilliant BBC editor, Biddy Baxter, first handbagged some sense and values into me. I mean, she ran the BBC's iconic show Blue Peter for overseas visitors with an editorial rod of iron. It was accuracy, originality, audience engagement, and bizarrely loads of animals in every shot. She used to shout more fur, less flesh from across the gallery, you know, the production gallery. And lots of us here, I think, have had that BBC production education at some point. You worked there with me, Pat, and Kevin was a fellow BBC trainee, and Peter Bazalgette was a colleague at BBC Docs. Discovery's Dominic Coles, who did the Olympics deal, Lorraine Hegarty, Jen Tranter, Big Wayne Garvey, Dan Lux, Stephen Lambert. I mean, that's a super group. And we need the next generation of creative leaders like them at BBC Studios. And since Biddy put me right 30 years ago, I think so much has remained the same at the BBC, probably a frightening amount. But the core values are really important. The pursuit of those high standards, that drive for skills, craft and creativity that underpins the widest range of genres, working from the broadest number of British bases. And, you know, if you think about the lineage from Come Dancing back in the day to Strictly Come Dancing, The Sky at Night to the 40,000 citizen scientists of Stargazing Live, Doctor Who's first Time Lord to the current 12th, it represents a through line of creative continuity in the UK for our audiences and staff alike, from the origins of TV to the on-demand world. And I think it's really important we have well-established, well-run bases in Bristol, West London, Glasgow, Belfast, Greater Manchester, Cardiff and Birmingham. We have this unique creative footprint across the BBC. While BBC production hasn't changed, it's so interesting coming back into the business because we're just about the only programme-making organisation of any scale still working to the one single broadcaster through one funnel. That's a strength, but the world's changed. It's also a bit of a challenge because so much around us has changed profoundly. Particularly, I think, the strategic role of IP in building international businesses, the massive growth and success of the commercial and independent production sectors. That sense of global opportunity that most UK creatives now enjoy, the drama session really gave you that sense. So my new job, and listen, I'm just 2.5 weeks in now, so be gentle with me, is to build on what's great about BBC in-house productions, to take our traditions and values forward, but just make sure we're fit for purpose in an age of global content. And ultimately, in terms of the mothership, help guarantee that BBC television continues to have the best and most competitive lineup of programmes available for licence fee payers from inside and outside the corporation. I mean, I think Biddy Baxter would still approve, I hope.
Okay. So you're at a bit of a disadvantage because your boss is going to do the big speech
He is.
later on.
Better be careful.
So you've got to be careful about what you can and can't say. I'm going to just ask you some questions, and if you feel like you can answer them, please do.
I thought you would. You've not changed then. Yeah.
Will children's be in studios?
No.
No. Okay. Why not?
You didn't say it has to be some follow-up. She just said last some question.
I'm not Jeremy Corbyn.
I think because I don't want to go into the. I should probably let Tony follow that up in some sense because sorry, I got slightly ahead of the document we're producing this afternoon. I think it's been widely speculated on what's in and what's out, but I think children's is a absolutely kind of unique part of the BBC. It's going through a huge amount of change. The BBC is it commissions 95% of all UK original productions. It's in a very particular place in the sector, and it's going to move into a new on-demand world fairly sharpish. We want to make sure it gets there successfully. It's going to go through a lot of change in itself.
Okay. Now, this whole process has been called commercialising BBC production. How would you describe it?
I think it's about, you can choose your verb, but I think it's about liberating it. I mean, I genuinely think the businesses remain pretty static. I don't mean in terms of ideas and in terms of creativity, but the way it's been run, its structure, its organisation. It still feels like the kind of top-down organisation that I worked in myself and maybe Kevin and others did 20, 30 years ago. And it needs kind of liberating. I mean, the analogy I use is, we've lived with our parents a long time, and there's a kind of world of opportunity. We sort of need to move out. I mean, and we don't want to move too far away. Initially, we're going to move into the basement flat and have our own front door key. And then we just need to move around the corner and do what some of our siblings are doing, have a few more, take our shirts off at parties from time to time, have a few drinks, just stay out, explore the world a bit. Because I think that'll be better, sorry, it's a bizarre analogy, but I think...
Totally weird.
Yeah,
but very quotable.
But that's what I thought. We may as well be colourful. I just think we need to have a bit more fun, and we need to explore it more. The world's changed. I don't think we've changed enough.
Okay. Our friend Dominic Coles came back from business school with this expression, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Now, we know the BBC, there's been a lot of strategy work done on this. What's the cultural challenge for you?
Well, I've really enjoyed the last 6 or 7 years doing the kind of big cultural thing in Salford. I mean, one of the, I think, real successes of Salford, and anybody who's spent any time, we should hold the next RTS convention in Salford because pumped, because it's got an amazing culture. It's very open, it's very collaborative, it's very digital. There's a great leadership cadre. The staff are really up for it. It feels like a big creative community, honestly. We work alongside indies from Red and ITV Productions really brilliantly. It really feels like it's a kind of big creative fellowship. I mean, much the same way, I think. I mean, I come to this convention, and more or less you see the same faces. It's become more internationalised, of course, but we've got such a lot in common. There are so many things that we share, from kind of freelancers to training to technology and all sorts of things. I need to build a common culture across the place. Businesses can become, whether they're companies or whether they're divisions or departments, they can become quite siloed. A lot of the advantages of scale, of connectivity, of storytelling, over the years, you can get quite siloed. The place can get quite silted up. I really enjoy that cultural work. The big thing I think that's so important is leadership. I don't mean necessarily mine. It's, the leadership group. You can often, I think, in the BBC, devise departments and lovely departmental structures, but then think who's going to lead it. I mean, my feeling is it's really about leadership. It's about that enthusiasm, that vision, the sense of people putting their arms around other people, creating safe havens for people to do their best work. Structure's important, strategy's important, but leadership's crucial.
Okay. Kevin, RTV.
Yes, what about it?
What would you like to share with us about your vision?
Well, I think, in a way we're a blend of what Peter was talking about, what Jane was talking about. Jane didn't describe herself as an IP farm, I noticed. She has rather sinister connotations with that, with sort of John Malone as Kaiser Sose in the background. But we, as you know here, we were born out of this huge production base, designed to service ITV in all its manifestations. And still largely here in the UK, we make programming for ITV. And I think over the last few years, we've concentrated on having a closer relationship with our own network, with knowing exactly what it wants, helping it devise what it might want, and kind of getting our act in order here in the UK. And that involved primarily people. As Peter was leaning about leaders, I would also say it's at every level within the organisation, and primarily producers. You want to be a place that encourages producers to want to come and work and do that. And so you use every trick in the book that you can in order to do that. I think internationally, we have taken a big step in the last few years. And although we have offices around the world, it's America really where we decided to properly invest and concentrate, because we felt American content, when you look around the world, we have to admit it, is the most desired sort of content, more so even than great British content. And we have this big international distribution setup, which is already functioning very well. But we thought in America, if we can get a presence there, I think it can only be great for the growth and expansion of what we do and of ITV generally. So we were impatient and wanted to do it quickly, and the way you do that largely is to acquire. So we acquired a number of production companies. The consolidation that we'd all lived through here hadn't really happened in America, and so we could see lots and lots of production companies that were available to be bought of different sizes, and we chose a few and have done that. And so what we're in that interesting phase. Jane is ahead of it in effect, because all three started 10, 15 years ago, whenever it was. And so we're in the earn-out phase. We didn't buy 100% of most of the companies. And at the moment, we're doing the federal thing. We're allowing these companies to, we bought them because they're really good and they were being really successful. And so we've, at first, left them alone, offered all the help we can, but in the end, it's pats on the back and a bit more money. And so it's only now that we're halfway through this process and we've got proper relationships with them that we're starting to shape what the business is going to look like in a few years' time. And in America, it'd be the same here. You know, if you were an American, I'm sure Michael will talk about this, you really do have to have proper relationships with people in the industry, with buyers, with channels. And it's very hard to fast track that. But if you buy a company that has a long-standing relationship with various networks, then you can, through them, get into that proper relationship with the buyers and the whole community. And I think that we're doing quite successfully. I'm pleased with the way that's working. So we're working with 40 networks or something now in the States. And as we said, we are, now I don't want to sound too Zaslavian about it, but we are the largest producer of non-scripted material in the globe. And so...
Just in the US.
Sorry, in the US, beg your pardon. But it's important in America. Scale gets you to the table, makes people sit up and think, all right, who are these guys? They've got you know, okay, hey, look, we spend $100 million with them, says a network. So it does fast track your way into being a partner with a lot of these buyers. So that's been our strategy, and that's kind of where we're at the moment.
So for you, size does matter?
It's always important.
You said that you've given the UK network a lot more of focus.
Yeah.
I think you now account for 60% of all of their commissions.
Yes.
How much of an inside track do you really get on what's going on at ITV?
It feels like a battle. So it doesn't feel like you're sort of slipped commissions under the table. I really don't think that happens. And Peter would say that, I'm sure. I think the first sort of area of growth was quite obvious to us, because it had been run down a bit, the production base, and so we hired people, better people, more people, and started to build up the three main areas that we're in, obviously scripted, factual, and entertainment. And I think it takes, we know with scripted how long it takes, and you're starting to see now, I think when I joined we were 18% or something of the scripted shows on ITV, and the target must be there to get to at least 50%, which we will do next year. So that's taken a lot of time, and I think when the whole company sees the investment you've got to put in that's necessary to do that, of course, there's some pressure to go, we are spending a lot of money investing in this and hiring people and getting on with it. It must be because we think that's a good idea. So don't you think it's a good idea too, Peter? But he's absolutely never put a gun to his head. I would put a gun to his head on regular occasions, but I'm not allowed. So we have to do it by merit, and I genuinely think we have. So the organic growth, if you like, if you remove the influence of the acquisitions, is substantial. And I think we're the better for it.
And what about this risk that you face in a couple of years' time when these earn-outs end? You could end up with a shell.
Yes, you could. I think that's the job, is to manage what you've bought properly, and all three's been through this, and I think it's different a bit in America than it is here. I think you have to work on the succession planning quite early in the process. You have to, jointly with the people that have built the business, see what do you want to do? You know, is this challenging enough for you? There probably isn't another enormous lump of money like you made at the beginning. So what motivates you? What are the challenges? How can we help you? You know, if you ask producers what they would really like, it's, I just want to get my show on the air. And I think an advantage we have, and I hear this more and more actually in America, to do with scripted, which I suppose we'll get on to later, is, you know, we do have the ITV suite of channels where I think we should be using more effectively the people that we want to work with. We should give them access to places that don't damage the schedule in any way, but bits here and there certainly wouldn't. Try out new ideas, all this sort of thing. I think, you know, I'd hate to sort of look back in a few years' time and think, oh God, we really missed an opportunity there of developing our own IP, because we all know the ownership of the IP is vital going forward. And I think we're in a very good place now to experiment and try more shows on our own networks.
Okay, thank you. Michael,
Sure.
NBCUniversal.
NBCUniversal International Studios is a boutique English language studio set inside a very large media company. In fact, Comcast NBCU does about $65 billion of turnover a year. With that said, we've made a very conscious choice to focus on local English language content. So myself and my corporate team are based in the UK. In the UK, we're comprised of Carnival Films, which you guys all know does Downton Abbey. We also have a joint venture with Tim and Eric at Working Title. We have a new comedy company called Lucky. And then, you know, two great factual companies, Monkey Kingdom, which makes Made in Chelsea, and Chocolate, which produces high-end factual content. We also have a great production base in Australia called Matchbox, which is a company we started investing in 2011, and it's become, you know, an exciting award-winning business. That company has grown from making one program potentially every other year to making 8 programs next year on the scripted side alone, and they also do unscripted now with Real Housewives, which has been a huge success for Foxtel. In Canada, we have a company which we helped start up called Lark, which we have a minority share in. Unlike Jane's business, we actually focus very heavily on working with our companies, not just financially or strategically, but we also get very, very involved in the creative. I think some of that is our American DNA. I come obviously you know, from Los Angeles. And I always found my studio partners when making shows like Desperate Housewives could be very helpful. So we get involved, and it depends on each project, but sometimes from the very beginning, sometimes we come in midway and give thoughts and creative feedback. Other times, in the case of Downton Abbey, you know, Gareth and Julian have really driven all the creative without us, and we've helped set a strategy to distribute that show around the world. Very much focused on creating the best English language content outside of the US. We continue to invest in quality storytellers. We're very, very passionate about what we do. And despite the pressures to always deliver a bottom line, I think the reason, you know, that I get up in the morning is about making great content. And I really try to attract those people to the business. I know we're getting short on time, so you want to jump in.
It's okay. I mean, so you describe yourself as a boutique. What's the strategic thinking behind that?
Well, it was interesting. When Comcast took over the business, we took a good hard look. I was hired to build Endemol. And what we realized very quickly was we have these amazing distribution pipes. We have 17 distribution offices around the world, and those distribution offices are selling primarily English language content. So rather than try to be everything to everybody and potentially, risk building something that wasn't sustainable, and you have to remember, we didn't have any big format hits to drive growth into France or into Germany. We really made a decision to focus what we do best, which is English language. And we certainly know the customers who want to acquire English language high-end drama.
You talked about being very involved in the creative.
Yes.
What does that mean in English language?
I think it means that, to give a specific example, there's a project we have coming out this month called Yumi and the Apocalypse on Sky. That was a tricky light 1 hour. It's a very clever show. And Anne Mensa was very, very excited by the creative, but light 1 hour is a very difficult genre to get right. And because I have a background creatively with Desperate Housewives, my colleague Joanne Alfano in Los Angeles, who oversees our scripted business, produced 30 Rock. She came to us and said, listen, we really want to pick up the show. It's the largest show we've ever commissioned that we don't own. Would you guys get involved and help backstop this thing creatively? And that led to Joanne bringing Rob Lowe into the show, Jenna Fisher, Megan Mullally with a swastika on her forehead, so tune in for that. And so it's been a really good collaboration. Anne knows we're very strong partners. It's also led to another show that we're now doing with Tiger, and we don't own Tiger. So, I think the commissioners know that we add tremendous value, and our goal is that every time we touch the content, we help improve it.
Okay, one last question for you. What everybody tells me is that your production strategy is to buy ITV.
Oh, that's funny. I think like David Zaslav, we look at everything, but truth be told, as I understand it, when Comcast bought NBCUniversal, only 10 people knew about it internally out of 100,000 employees. So I think it's safe to say if that happens, I'll read about it in Deadline.
Okay. So we're going to come out to all of you in a minute, but just a question to Jane and Michael to start with, and Kevin as well. What's the difference between working in an American culture versus a British culture? Jane, do you want to go?
So I guess momentum, that's one of the things we've learned. We like momentum. We've learned to move faster.
So they move faster?
They do move faster. Well, certainly our Americans move faster.
Well, we saw him just now.
Yeah, he moves fast. And that's good. That's cool. I think you sort of win deals if you can move swiftly. So that's one thing. They ask lots and lots and lots of questions. That's another thing that we're just sort of coming to understand, and Michael and I talk about this, and not to take as a criticism. I just think that's part of the job when you work for Americans.
How do your creatives respond, though?
Well, we try to insulate our creatives big time.
This is the role of the centre.
That's a lot of the job, yeah, from these very long lists of questions. But yeah, I mean, Michael and I talk about this because you take it as a Brit, you think, oh, this is hugely critical. It means they think I'm a half-wit and I haven't thought these things. It isn't. I think that's just what you do when you're in America. So that's something we've learned, not to take that perhaps personally, to use it actually. But you know what, properly they're supportive. So actually it's been a very positive thing for us.
Early days, Jane, early days.
Early days. And I don't know what Nick Southgate was talking about. Apparently in 3 years' time it will all change. But so far it's been, properly positive, our American experience.
How have your English colleagues responded to the American approach?
I think it's been tricky, and I think you have to be a cultural anthropologist to work outside your own country. I certainly underestimated the fact that we speak two very different languages. And quite honestly, part of the reason I hired Sarah Cooper, who many of you know in the audience, is she's the consummate British executive. So sometimes, I'll tell a funny anecdote, we'll be in a situation of conflict with a broadcaster or something won't be going well. I'll write an email, I'll run it by Sarah, she'll say, you can't send this. It's just too confrontational. So she'll say, leave it with me. She'll rewrite the email, and she'll ask me to send this email. I'll read the email, and I say, what are we asking for? I can't tell.
British diplomacy, you see.
And Sarah, for those of you who know her, has a very forceful personality. She'll say, just send it. So I push send. An hour later, we get back to the perfect answer with everything, neatly tied up and no conflict at all. So I think part of it is being American. You have to learn to speak softer. I think you have to learn to deal with pacing issues. So while Jane has to pace up her life, sometimes we have had to learn to to understand that we're not going to change a culture overnight and to slow down. I think the other thing is Americans ask a lot of questions. I'm not sure we're the best listeners. So learning to listen is, I think, a really important part for anybody doing business overseas.
So how's your listening skills, Kevin?
What? I think no, there are differences, and Americans in the best sense. I'm half American actually, so I can talk on both sides. They're quite needy, wouldn't you say, Michael? You know, it's like, yes, I'll have some more supper, please. Yes. Oh no, but you're doing such a marvelous job. There's a lot of that. There is a lot of that. I was really surprised how much of that they need. And I think, look, obviously in the UK you have a shorthand of what you do. The other thing, Americans are endlessly positive, and it's a really, you know, most of the time that's a wonderful thing. Other times it's, oh, you should have been. So 2 nights ago we launched a very big deal for us on NBC. We launched a new show, Best Time Ever, which is, we've taken Saturday Night Takeaway and reformatted it essentially, and it's got Neil Patrick Harris, who's a huge star in America, and it launched on Tuesday night on NBC, and everybody and their uncle was there, and the backslapping and high-fiving in every commercial break about how brilliant it was, and Hugh Green, who was producing it, a great British producer, and myself would look at each other and go, not bad. And so there really was a cultural difference. That and that Bob Greenblatt sat in the back of the gallery through the entire programme looking at his phone. And I can only assume it was a
Twitter,
yeah.
Most probably.
But I did think, well, you could have a look at the show and see what you think. No, it was a triumph, by the way, I'm pleased to say.
Absolutely. Peter, different question for you. A lot of discussion out there about the future of factual.
Yeah.
Now, probably, in terms of bodies, factual is probably half your business?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great part of our business. And, you know, we've been doing it since the beginning of television. You know, we're really good at it. So if you look at all the science programming this week on BBC Two, from Countdown to Life, you know, Michael Mosley's new Landmark, to Game Changer, the Daniel Radcliffe film, to Horizon yesterday on BBC Two. I mean, brilliant, you know, world-beating strip of fantastic science programs. The Natural History Unit with Deep Blue Live this summer, I think, just was one of the kind of innovative highlights of the whole summer schedule. So it's one of our strengths. I heard, I think it was this morning, AMC were doing a session talking about zagging when other people are zigging. You know, you've got to, in these businesses, beware sticking all your bets on a single chip. We've been making great factual landmarks and great formats from, you know, look at the, I mean, the Sky at Night and Stargazing Live. Look at the kind of pedigree there. I think there's a real virtue for me in our holding on to as much depth and range. And it's going to sound bizarre because we're moving into a phase where we're going to have to be much more competitive, but in religion and in music and in science and in natural history and the rest, and in docs and others I've probably not mentioned and offended. I think it's really important. I think from there come, you know, where did Top Gear come from? It came from a humble factual features department in Birmingham, went through several iterations, and it's now, you know, best-selling program in the world, or whatever it might be. And that through line, and all that complexity, and all that development, and all that expertise, it's incredibly important to my new business and to the BBC. So, it's going to be at the heart of what we do.
Jane, David said that through you, he was putting a big bet on scripted. And I see you've got some more scripted investments today.
Yeah, no.
Can the market sustain all of this scripted investment, scripted activity?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I think the answer is economic largely, isn't it? I think most broadcasters, I imagine if you ask them, would you like more scripted rather than less scripted, they would say yes. So then it becomes a matter of how affordable is it and how clever we can be. I mean, the thing we perhaps haven't talked about much here is the whole sort of globalization of our industry is, I mean, dramatically different. So I don't suppose we make any programs now ever that are purely British or American or German. They all travel in some way, and scripted is obviously that type of show, isn't it? Every single thing we do now has some sort of co-production, some sort of deficit funding, something smart with Netflix or SVOD or whatever it may be on the back end. So I think the answer is the appetite for scripted is huge. Can you make the model work? And let's just try and be as inventive as we possibly can on the economics.
Michael,
well,
you've got a big bet on...
No, we continue to bet big on scripted. I think what's happening is that in the old days, you could make a nice TV program. You could make a program for, let's say, £1 million, and there'd be a 10% deficit, and you could easily recoup that around the world. And the program might not be the best thing, but it certainly was passable as entertainment. I think what's happened is that was the middle class for all media companies. It was, you'd make a lot of those programs, you'd distribute a lot of those programs, you'd make a nice margin, and there was no challenge. I think what's happening now with the glut of scripted content is that you need to make shows that are distinctive, that stand out, and that people will talk about. And part of that is because there's so much. The other piece of it is because of SVOD, you're no longer competing against linear programming. So do you want to watch a new season of a new drama? So, you know, we have You, Me, and the Apocalypse starting later this month. I keep plugging that in case you're not paying attention.
Was that called Apocalypse Slam?
It was called Apocalypse
Yes,
Slam.
I remember that.
That doesn't travel though, does it?
Well, by the way, it didn't test well here.
Yeah.
Because we were fighting for the title as producers, and Sky ultimately decided not to go with it. But to get back to my point, what now, do you want to tune in and watch Apocalypse Slam, or You, Me, and the Apocalypse as it's now called? Or if you've never seen Breaking Bad, do you just want to turn on Netflix and start that show? So the difficulty for all of us is that scripted is no longer competing against what's on the air that night. Scripted is competing against the greatest series of all time, which are readily available with the touch of a button. And I think that's the challenge that content creators face moving forward.
Okay, that's a good point to go out to the audience. We've got about 15 minutes for questions. If you can keep your questions brief, say who you are. So, lady there, and then a gentleman there, and then there. So, yeah.
Hi, Tara Conlan. Can I just ask Peter a couple of things?
Just one, Tara.
It's not about that party.
It's very small. How are you going to ensure that you're not going to be sold off one day? What kind of mechanism is in place once you've moved out of the public service wing? And do you feel pressure as well after Tony Hall said that he wanted the next big entertainment programme to come from in-house rather than be bought in like The Voice?
Okay.
I think that's brilliant, the brilliant kind of pressure. I mean, we funny enough, we want to create the big new entertainment format from in-house. We're competitive. I'm so proud of Strictly. It's an amazing show. It's just rather brilliant. It's the world's favourite as well as Britain's favourite and all that stuff. And that's the perfect virtuous circle, isn't it? It feeds back into BBC Worldwide, which feeds back into the BBC's public service kitty, and all the rest of it. So that's incredibly important. I love that kind of pressure. That's great. We can live with that. I don't want to get ahead of the Tony Hall speech later.
If you want detail,
he's disappeared from the room now.
If you want detail,
I probably can. But I think he should deal with the question of where this is going to sit inside the public service and then as a commercial subsidiary. I think otherwise he'll steal his thunder.
I know the journos all want to get ahead of the speech, but you're going to have a chance to ask questions about that after the speech. So let's pick up some of the broader issues which we've been talking about up here. Gentleman over there.
Yeah, hi, Ed Shedd of Deloitte. You represent your companies really, really well, and I was just thinking as you were talking, what's the one thing that if someone could give you a magic wand that you really, really crave that would make your businesses even more successful? And Pat will allow you to choose who answers that.
Anybody want to go first?
Yeah, capital. It's good to invest.
Capital, good to invest from Jane.
Yeah.
Capital.
Better people.
People. Always want to be upskilling. Okay, next question. There's a guy here. Are there any questions near the back? I can't see. Any questions towards the back? Yeah, there's a lady right at the back there. But a guy here first.
Hi, Jake Cantor from Broadcast Magazine. Jane, you've obviously been very vocal about BBC Studios in the past, and if reports are to be believed, ITV has significant reservations about this big new beast in the market. What does Tony Hall have to say later to calm your concerns?
Very clever. Very clever.
Well, I mean, you know, I'd love to have as level a playing field, to use the BBC's expression, as possible, and have the opportunity to bid for some of those lovely BBC shows. I mean, that's what I'd love him to say.
Okay.
I was briefed on this and I've forgotten what they told me to say.
And speaking as the BBC's third biggest supplier anyway.
Oh, are we? God.
Yeah, you are.
Well, they're a wonderful organisation, aren't they? Look, we haven't seen a lot of detail yet, so I don't... Look, competition is honestly only good, and I think everybody would agree that's a good thing. I just don't understand quite yet what it's going to be, so let's wait and see.
I think we're all with you on that. Right, there's a lady right at the back.
Hi, I'm Laura Mansfield, Chair of PACT Council and Managing Director, Outline Productions. We've talked a lot today about the uniqueness of our ecosystem in the UK, and you're all at a certain stage in that ecosystem. Can I ask the panel, how important do you think the continuation of the terms of trade are for the UK production ecosystem?
Jane, I'm sure you're going to say it's a good thing.
It's a good thing. It's a very good thing.
Peter's going to say...
Well, do you want to say it for me? No, not for Bal. I mean, I think the independent sector is blooming fantastic. And there's a huge amount that we need to emulate in terms of speed to market, distribution, the way you've gone global, all sorts of things. So, you know, I want to be part of a successful British creative ecology. You know, there's not a big axe to grind. We want to be part of it. It's a balanced ticket right across the sector. You know, we want to be a thriving, successful BBC Studios. At the same time, we want to be alongside a thriving, booming British independent sector too.
Yes. No, look, they're fine, the terms of trade. There's going to be another review, yippee, we haven't had one of those for 15 minutes. So, you know, well, it doesn't really affect me personally, but it affects ITV. But so I think, good, let's have another go round the boy.
We don't qualify for terms of trade, but I think they're extremely important because what they do is they get more and more young people into the business, setting up their own companies. And I think that's what makes this environment so unique, is that people who have a dream, who want to branch out on their own, risk a bit of their own time and capital, and also take investment to build something, can then go off and fulfill that dream. But there's no better motivator to create than having your own business. So I think that's a really important part of the ecosystem, and I think it's something that needs to be protected.
It can't be, you know, distance from the success of British formats abroad, largely that have come from independence, that because they've been allowed to hang on to rights, they're more motivated, they can, the control of those rights are not just letting them go out there and be changed. And, you know, you hear time and time again when, to be honest, a bit like we did the other night with Best Time Ever as Saturday Night Takeaway, you know, the more you as the originating producer are involved, my experience is the better that program will be than if you just sort of palm it off to somebody else and let them make it. So I think it's great.
Okay, there's a question at the back there.
Hi, I'm Marianne Halford from FTI Consulting. As one of the few Americans here today, it's been interesting hearing a lot about America from the perspective of England. But you know, in America we hear a lot and learn a lot about, or many people I know in the media and entertainment business have talked about how they have learned from the UK. And certainly the American production and development ecosystem has been impacted, whether or not it's in the form of talent and the way shows are developed and created, the move to 10, 12 episode series. I was curious as to what people's thoughts are on the reverse in terms of you guys impacting us over there and the benefits of that in terms of building a broader US-UK relationships.
You know, I'll jump in and say something interesting. So when I first got here, you know, the preconception was I came out, so go back to 2010, and it was a world of 22 episodes of television in the US. I think what's happened is the US has come to realize that it is very hard to maintain quality serialized programs and make 22 episodes a year. Certainly the British being able to do that for a long period of time and making 6 really well-crafted or 8 really well-crafted episodes of television has now caught on. I think what we're seeing now is the fact that, you know, once you get above 6 to 12 episodes, those can travel and play in multiple places where they couldn't travel before. I think we're all able to monetize those a little bit better. So, you know, the British authored system makes a lot of sense in terms of creating novels for television. The nice thing is that US networks are now starting to open up to the fact that if they can get 10 good hours or 8 good hours, they're okay with that, which helps us sell our content back into the US.
Jane, any?
I mean, I would, no, nothing.
Kevin, what about your personal civilizing mission to America?
I have noticed there is a difference, and there might be a slight cautionary tale for us here in the UK. I think the broadcasters there, partly because there are so many more of them, tend to have much more influence over what is wanted. And I've seen with our producers and most producers, I'd say not scripted, this applies to, but all other forms of telly, is that I don't see as many people, individuals, who've got an idea for a program that they want to make, somehow encouraged and being allowed to do what they want. And what Peter was just saying about the BBC, that's one of the great things about the BBC. And one of the challenges Peter's going to have is there's some old chap who's only makes one program a year, locked in a room in some building, and but it might be a brilliant program. And this is going to be the difference, because in America, the desire to just sell your show, and whatever the network execs say, and they are very here today, gone tomorrow types, the producers tend to immediately agree with and go, yes, oh yes, no, I'll turn it around, I'll stick it in the
I don't agree with that always. I think experienced producers know when to push back, but you have to have the confidence, and I think the really great showrunners I've worked with, take
this is scripted mainly you're talking about.
A bit, but you have to sort of fight your battles. I mean, what I always talk about with our group is we don't produce shows for broadcasters, we produce them for ourselves. And I don't disagree with you that there's a number of executives, everybody thinks they have a good idea in America, and the executives tend to rotate through much quicker, but I do think it's incumbent upon producers to fight the good fight.
Definitely.
How do you develop another Adam Curtis?
Well, thankfully, we've still got Adam Curtis. So, I mean, there are other really brilliant... I mean, if you look at... I think it's been really interesting looking at some of the iPlayer experiments. And looking at, I don't know whether experiments now anymore, they're pretty established, but if you look at a little series, for instance, of iPlayer drama shorts called My Jihad, there are people coming through now in all sorts of different genres, probably influenced by people like Adam, who's brilliant, open-minded, surprising, edgy, all the rest of it. I think we've got to maintain the kind of openness of that culture. There isn't a convention, there isn't a single style, there's not a single approach, there's no uniformity. It's lovely, of course it is, to find the blockbuster and the 26 parts and all sorts of things, but there's something about the many access points and the multiple entry points, even around the bases of the BBC, which we've really got to preserve. I mean, I've learnt it so much from the different community we built in Salford, and from running parts of BBC Bristol and all sorts of things. There's a glory in those multiplicity of voices and access points and shapes and sizes. The trick is, on occasions, to catch one or two of them and scale them up and make them bigger and do all the things I think the Americans have been doing for a number of years rather brilliantly. We're not so good at that. It can be eccentric to a fault and idiosyncratic to a fault. And there's something about the new business which has got to catch that and take it to another level.
I mean, I remember having to do a finance justification for Adam, because productivity-wise, he makes 3 hours every 2 years.
But everybody worries about what what's going to happen, what's the solution. The solution is very simple. It's make a hit. And so what you just have to do is create the environment where those hits can work. And you'll never spot where they're going to come from. And it's quite interesting. I'm sure lots of people here saw The Jinx. And The Jinx was big, talked about thing, but it was a very old-fashioned idea of a 6-part documentary series about a murder. And, I can see that something will come along, and it could well be based out of a sort of what we would all say is, well, we used to do that back in the day. It was the same with big entertainment shows 10, 12 years ago. Oh, Saturday Night Entertainment's dead, when Noel's house party was collapsing. And all this, oh, it's never going to come, it's never going to come. And there it comes. And ITV, curiously, created I'm a Celebrity and Hell's Kitchen and these shows out of the weird gap between factual and entertainment. and it was Jim Allen and his team back then in those days that, I don't know, you were probably there, Peter, but it was, you know, who would have thought that these great juggernauts of entertainment would have come out of a sort of slightly disgruntled factual team sitting in London Weekend
But they
Television.
came, Kevin, at a time when they were competing with the entertainment department. So what was quite interesting, so it's a lesson actually maybe for the new BBC. So you had the factual department, you're right, with Natalka and Jim, competing with the guys in entertainment. So actually that internal competition produced the most amazing things out of all places, the factual department. It was interesting.
And there, I'm afraid we have to end. Can I ask your thanks for the panel, please?